About a decade after Dr. Ferguson retired, we realized that there was a generation of students who were unfamiliar with Lloyd, what he had meant to this campus, and how important his legacy is. Professors Don Paulson and Costello Brown began this lecture series as a reminder for us all.
Dad was born in Oakland, California, February 9, 1918. His parents worked away from home, and for much of his childhood, he stayed with his grandparents, who lived down the street. When he was about 7 or 8, he missed a year of school, most of it in the hospital, with diphtheria and pneumonia. When he returned to school, he skipped half of the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and 7th grades, and still graduated from high school at age 16.
Dad fell in love with chemistry when he bought his first chemistry set in the 8th grade, and he took chemistry as soon as he got to high school. His teacher, Miss Forsythe, was very inspirational. She hired him to be her lab assistant to set up the experiments for the next day. About that time, he built a shed in the backyard that became Ferguson's chemistry laboratory.
I wrote a little chemistry leaflet in which I'd put lab experiments and some discussion of basic theory and the chemical crossword puzzle and advertisement. I'd type it up and so forth. I had 4 products at that time. Mortho, which was a moth repellent. The neighbors bought it as fast as I made it because it was convenient. They could just hang this up in the closet. And I made Presto, which was a silverware cleaner. I made Clino, which was a spot remover. I guess the 4th thing I made was Lemo. All you had to do was add water to make lemonade.
All through undergraduate school, Dad worked as a red cap. He handled the baggage on the Oakland-San Francisco ferry. The hours were convenient for college because they were 6 to 10 in the morning and 6 to 10 in the evening.
All my time, essentially through undergraduate school days, were taken up, working in the morning and night and going to school during the day. So I didn't do much else. Quite a few of my professors became Nobel laureates. I think it was exciting, the 30s and the 40s. I feel that the research that was done here led to more Nobel prizes than any other 2 decades.
Dad earned his Bachelor of Science with honors from UC Berkeley in 1940. He had hoped to work with George Washington Carver at Tuskegee, so he called him up, but Carver advised him that he should get a PhD first. He was admitted to Berkeley's graduate program, working under Professor G.E.K. Branch.
Lloyd was able to quit red capping when the chemistry department hired him to work on a national defense project under Dr. Melvin Calvin. The objective was to produce a substance that would release oxygen when heated without burning up. When it cooled, it would reabsorb oxygen, and the process could be repeated. That way, ships and subs would not have to carry dangerous oxygen tanks.
I was lucky to be able to do my dissertation work under G.E.K. Branch while also working with Calvin on the project. So I had 2 different types of research going on. And I learned a lot from both of them because they were very different in their approaches to research problems.
In 1943, Dad became the first African American to obtain a PhD in chemistry from UC Berkeley.
My counselor, Professor Stewart, had told me that it was very unlikely that I would get a professional job in industry when I graduated because of my race. And so that was one of the reasons I prepared for teaching. I took some engineering classes, I took some psychology classes. And then when I was about to get my PhD, none of the recruiters set up interviews for me. So then I realized it was going to be a little difficult in getting a job, as Professor Stewart had said. An announcement of a teaching position came in at a black school in North Carolina, A&T College. I applied for the job and got appointed assistant professor there.
While he was at North Carolina A&T, Dad accepted an offer from Tuskegee, and then the offer from Howard University came. Howard had a larger, stronger chemistry department, and Dad felt it offered greater opportunities for professional growth, so he chose to go to Howard. The family moved to Washington, D.C. in 1945. Dad became a full professor in 1955 and department chair in 1958.
My elementary school was just a few blocks away, so after school, I would walk there and spend a couple of hours at Howard waiting for my father to finish and drive us home. I remember there was a big lecture hall with a piano, and my brother Steve would play it on Saturday mornings when Dad was in the office. It was fun walking around the department and watching him interact with the students and other teachers. The students seemed to really respect him and admire him.
He did not compromise his standards. Sometimes I see people who took his classes and they say one of the most difficult things they ever had to do was to pass organic chemistry under Lloyd Ferguson.
Howard University had a master's program in chemistry, but Dad knew many of the students were capable of going farther in their research and led the department in starting the PhD program. The physics department was also very strong, and it was a race to see which department would get a PhD program first. Chemistry won, and that program was the first at any HBCU.
Howard has produced more African American PhDs and more African American chemists than any other university in the world.
When Dad was first considering a sabbatical, Dr. Melvin Calvin's wife, Jen, suggested Copenhagen. The biochemical research at the Carlsberg Laboratorium interested Dad, and he won a Guggenheim Fellowship to study there, working with Heinz Holter. It was here he began his research in the chemistry of taste. His next sabbatical was as a faculty fellow at the ETH, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. He worked with Vladimir Prelog, who won the Nobel Prize in 1975. It was here he began his work in anticyclic chemistry.
The third was as a visiting professor at Nairobi in Kenya, which was jointly sponsored by the Ford Foundation, which had him visit several other African universities.
It was outstanding thinking outside the box to move his family for a year to Copenhagen, Denmark.
Imagine the excitement being 10 years old and being told by your parents at the dinner table that you're going to go live in Nairobi, Kenya, in Africa, for an entire year.
These sabbaticals did afford us a lot of travel experiences we otherwise might not have had.
Ghana, the Ivory Coast,
Rome, Paris, Iceland, Nice,
Zambia, Uganda,
skiing the Swiss Alps,
riding on a camel in Egypt,
riding in the Venetian canals and those big gondolas,
walking through a herd of wild buffalo on the way to dinner at Ngorongoro Crater.
Dad always enjoyed returning to California. In the summers of 1958, 1960, and 1963, he was a visiting professor at the University of Oregon. We always drove across the country, and we always spent several weeks in California at the end of the summer. Then in 1965, there was an announcement for a visiting professor at Cal State, LA. He got that, and that led to the permanent position.
We became mutually interested in each other. We liked the department. They were happy to have me join the department, so they offered full professorship with tenure, and so we stayed.
Lloyd was a valuable addition to the chemistry department. As he had been at Howard, he was a mentor to both faculty and students and was our department chair from 1968 through 1971. While here at Cal State, he also served on a number of national committees. His excellence as an educator was widely recognized.
I nominated Dr. Ferguson to receive the Journal of Chemical Education Award. This is a national award that's given every year. Dr. Ferguson received that award and actually had his picture on the cover of the Journal of Chemical Education. In 1974, Dr. Ferguson was the outstanding professor of Cal State LA campus and later was the outstanding professor for the whole state. Lloyd asked the faculty to submit proposals for a new program called MBS, Minority Biomedical Support Program. Then he told us that NIH was going to make a site visit. Up until then, almost all the support at NIH had gone to HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, and Hispanic-serving institutions. They had never made any grants out west or to comprehensive institutions like Cal State LA. They wanted to make sure the money would really be spent on minority education and advancing research.
NIH made a site visit to consider whether they'd start a program, because after all, this was a majority institution. But in terms of the numbers of minority Cal State LA had, that number was equal to many of the black institutions or the Hispanic institutions and so forth. So in terms of numbers, we had equivalent numbers, but the percentage was much lower.
So in 1973, Cal State LA became the first comprehensive institution to receive an MBS grant. Without Lloyd, this may have been delayed many years. He served as the first director for over a decade. MBS evolved into MBRS, then MBRS Rise. The latest iteration is the MORE programs. Students who participate in MORE are very successful. They come into the program at a variety of skill levels, from struggling to quite accomplished. They graduate at rates approaching 98%, which is far above average. Undergraduates go on to PhD programs at the rate of 70 to 75%, and master's students go on at 80 to 85%. Among the 2,500 baccalaureate and master's institutions in the continental United States, the National Science Foundation ranks Cal State LA as number 1 in the number of Hispanic alumni that go on to earn the PhD in science. Cal State LA is also number 1 in the number of Hispanic women that earn science PhDs. Most of the PhDs are in chemistry and biochemistry and the biological sciences. Most of the graduates participated in the Moore programs.
In 1968, the ACS asked Lloyd and others to create a program to reach out to educationally and economically disadvantaged high school students. They created Project SEED, the Summer Education Experience for the Disadvantaged.
High school students are given the opportunity to perform research for 1 or 2 summers in university, industrial, and federal laboratories. Students receive fellowship awards for each summer, and participants of the Summer 2 program are eligible for grants to present their research at ACS and other scientific meetings. They are also eligible to compete for college scholarships.
It is one of the ACS' greatest successes, with many of these students going on to careers in chemistry.
A word about the National Organization of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. I'm quite proud of it. I was one of the co-founders back in 72 or so. And we met in somebody's living room and laid out the plans for the organization and some of the activities that it may be involved in.
NOBCChE provides support to chemists and chemical engineers. There are professional chapters, almost 50 universities have chapters, and my own children participated in NOBCChe's middle school program. At the national meeting every year, papers are presented, graduate fellowships are awarded, there's a student college bowl and science fair, and there is recruiting by industry. Before NOBCChE came, there was no forum for African American chemists and chemical engineers to socialize or to support, recruit, and retain good students.
One of NOBCChe's annual awards is the Lloyd Ferguson Young Scientist Award, which acknowledges the contributions and achievements of junior faculty members.
Dr. Ferguson was a mentor to many, many minority chemists. He did it quietly. He didn't make a fuss about it. But he helped all in terms of providing guidance and support. So they named this award after him, and it continues to this day.
We felt that the gathering place for students should be named for a man who loved the sciences and worked tirelessly to give others educational opportunities. So, on February 18, 2011, the courtyard area in the Science Complex was dedicated as the Ferguson Courtyard.
I have no response. This is completely surprising. It's out of the world. And I appreciate all of you coming out today for this occasion. Thank you.
Lloyd was the author of over 50 journal articles with a wide range of topics, including the determination of structures of organic molecules, the chemistry of taste, cancer research, particularly carcinogens in chemotherapy, the use of alicyclics as research models, and the benefits versus the risk of synthetic compounds. He wrote 7 textbooks, 8 if you count the revised edition of 1. 3 books were physical organic chemistry textbooks, his field of study under Branch and Calvin. There were 2 volumes of alicyclic chemistry, 1 of applied organic chemistry, and the 2 editions of his textbook of organic chemistry. One of the textbooks has a special place in chemistry folklore.
In 1961, James Meredith was being barred from the University of Mississippi because he was African American. The governor refused to let him in, so President Kennedy sent U.S. Marshals, the Army, and the Mississippi National Guard. And the whole time they were fighting integration, an African American had already made a scholarly entrance. The chemistry department was using Lloyd's textbook.
They happened to be using my textbook in the chemistry department, but they didn't know the author was black. The publisher wouldn't put my picture on the jacket because some schools might not want to use it, seeing that the author is black.
Fortunately, not all of Lloyd's textbooks were published with the same anonymity.
When I was an 18-year-old sophomore at Hampton Institute, I was taking organic chemistry. My teacher, Dr. Horace Melvin, had several of us in his office, and he showed us an organic chemistry textbook. The thing that caught my eye was the fact that the author was an African American. We were having difficulty just understanding equations and mechanisms, and here an African American had actually written a whole textbook. None of us had ever seen any textbook written by an African American. For me, it was inspiring and overwhelming. I had no idea at the time that one day I would have a laboratory right next to this man and work for 10 years very closely with him. When I came to Cal State, L.A., I thought I had died and gone to heaven because one of my role models was in the laboratory right next to me.
I'm gonna pack my bags and burn them and look for some sort of sign. Help me find my way, Gypsy Hollow. I thought I saw someone just trying to follow me. Sure enough, I called him and he cried. He said, "Friend, I don't want to be here." And I said, "Friend, I didn't ask you to come." But I buried him just beside a Gypsy Hollow.